Inflation in the United States has been a problem for about 2 years now. And basically what that means is the price of everything needs to go up because companies are starting to have to produce more. And by everything, we mean the price of goods and services, but also wages and employment costs need to rise too. And right now we have seen one of the biggest boosts in employment costs that we've seen in about 20 years. So inflation is a big deal and it's costing everyone more right now. And while that may be true, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, one of the largest banks in the United States, had a serious message for CEOs and other businesses that are complaining about raising their wages and employment costs related to inflation right now. He said that CEOs should stop being crybabies about inflation and start paying their people more. And actually that is one of the biggest benefits that we've seen from inflation right now. So today I want to talk all about why Jamie Dimon thinks that inflation and our wages going up is actually a good thing for the United States and what the inflation outlook for 2022 is potentially going to be. But before I break this down, do me a quick favor and smash that thumbs up button below. I appreciate you doing that, and if you haven't yet, it's completely free and one of the best ways to stay up to date on all of the top business and financial news from around the country right now. Oh, and did I mention it's completely free? Thank you so much for doing that, and now let's talk all about Jamie Dimon and inflation. So here is the exact quote from Jamie Dimon when asked about raising wages because of inflation. He said, "Please don't say I'm complaining about wages. I think wages going up is a good thing for people who have the wages going up." He went on to say that CEOs should not be crybabies about it. They should just deal with it. The job is to serve your client as best as you can with all of the factors out there. So a very interesting response from Jamie Dimon here. He's basically saying companies need to figure out a way to pay their employees more, and if they can't do that, then that's a problem for them, not the individual employee. Now this is a complicated issue when it comes to wages and inflation because our job market right now is dynamic. There's a lot of moving parts with the Great Resignation and labor shortage issues. One of the reasons why we're facing labor shortage issues right now is because companies and businesses have been really lackluster when it comes to raising wages, and they're pretty much way too far behind. So people are quitting their jobs and they're going for other jobs that actually pay them right. For instance, throughout 2021, inflation went up at a rate of around 7%. That means if something costs $1 today, a year from now, it'll cost $1.07. That's not really a lot of money. But when you talk about your grocery bill, if you're paying 7 cents for just about everything and you multiply that by 100 to 150 items, now you're spending an extra $10 to $11 at the grocery store for all of the same things. And that's the crazy thing about inflation. Pretty much none of the goods and services around you are changing, just the prices. Except for Little Caesars, who actually is giving you 33% more pepperoni on their pizzas because of inflation, as they've had to raise their price of their $5 hot and ready to $5.55. Hashtag not an ad. But overall, the buying power and the value of your money starts to go down. Think of it this way. If there are $100 throughout the entire US economy and you have $1, well, that's pretty great. You hold 1% of all of the wealth. Now, if in a vacuum, nothing changes, so everything stays the same price forever, you make the same amount, well, that's pretty great. Except for the United States economy isn't just the only economy in the world. There are other economies, and the resources that we use are finite, like for energy. All of those other contributing factors will change how much money is needed in another economy. Because we have supply and demand issues and material issues all throughout the world, some things can be slowed down or stopped. That means the price of everything is going to go up. But like I said, in a vacuum, it's not a problem, except for if the Federal Reserve decides that people need a lot more money, it's time to expand our economy. We can stay at this exact same level and have $100 forever, or we can increase the monetary supply and start giving people a lot more money so we can do a lot more things. So the Federal Reserve comes out and says, hey everybody, we got a great idea. We're gonna raise inflation, but don't worry, it's not gonna be a problem because it's going to be calculated. So the United States Federal Reserve starts printing money, and say they print an additional $100. Now there is $200 in circulation. And I'm not a math guy, but just by basic math, your $1 does not equal the same amount that it did before. Now it's not 1% of the total amount of money available. Now it's only 0.5%. In order to have 1% of the wealth again, you need $2. Now, that's not really a big, crazy difference, but imagine if this happens on a scale of trillions of dollars. This is kind of the role that the Federal Reserve plays within our economy. They have to play this balancing act between printing a lot of money and keeping inflation down, because if they print way too much money, then Americans have way too easy access to dollars. They can go out and spend a ton of money all at once. That means the price of everything is going to have to go up because there's just not enough supply to meet whatever the demand is at that point. Companies now have to produce more, and when they produce more, that comes at a cost of hiring more workers, building more factories, and improving your supply chain. So now prices start to go up, and like I said, prices typically go up every single year. The Federal Reserve considers a healthy amount of inflation between 1% and 3%. 3% being the absolute max. And basically, printing money isn't the problem. Using money is the problem. If Americans spend way too much, then prices are going to reflect that. But just because you print a lot of money doesn't mean you actually have a problem in your economy. But that gets us back to Jamie Dimon. So he says wages going up is a good thing, and it's a good thing because Americans can buy more things now. But it's not just a good thing, it's an essential thing, because if the price of something is steadily rising over time and your workforce isn't making any money, that's a big problem for your economy, because now people aren't buying as much as they used to, which means companies can't expand as fast. Profits are going to fall, which means the stock on the New York Stock Exchange is going to fall, which means a lot of that extra liquidity is going to go away too. And not only that, but companies are going to have to downsize, which means less jobs overall for our entire economy, meaning unemployment is going to go up too. There's just not a need for money in our economy, because that's what you have to really think about here. Money is a tool for people to use. So when the United States government and the Federal Reserve prints money, they're not just printing money just to have money. They're printing money because people need more of it. More money to buy things, more money to invest, and more money for our businesses to grow. But with inflation rising by 7% in 2021, you'd think wages would also need to rise by 7%. But the problem is they didn't rise even anywhere near 7%. In fact, real wages actually decreased by around 2.4%, which means workers, even though they got some pay raises in certain companies, they didn't actually make any more money. Things cost even more than they did in 2021, so even though companies gave you more, the buying power and the value is less, so you actually lost money. That has made a ton of workers upset, and it has led to the great resignation that we're facing right now. You have millions of Americans right now who are quitting their jobs voluntarily because, one, companies are not treating them right in general, and they haven't for a very long time. Two, companies are not paying them right, so they're not meeting inflation. Workers are having to buy less and less. And three, we've had a lot of cultural shifts over the last 2 years, as a lot of employees are now looking for work from home positions, which makes a lot of sense because for most of these employees, they can do the exact same job but from home, which is more comfortable. They're saving time on a possibly 20 to 45 minute commute, and they're saving money because if they have kids, they now don't have to have any childcare costs, or they don't have to pay for gas, which means they're saving potentially $20 to $45 every single week. That's big savings, but a lot of companies have wanted their employees to get back to the office for a while, so employees just quit. Now they're searching for jobs that fill their needs, so everything that they want in a company, they have the power in the labor market, which is a complete switch from what we've seen over the last few decades. One job was highly competitive. You'd have sometimes hundreds of applicants putting in for that one job, and the companies had all of the power. If you didn't fit the exact specifications for that job, well, then you didn't get hired. Nowadays, though, companies are kind of working with the employees because they're not getting as many applicants. In some cases, they are, like the highly skilled and highly educated jobs. Well, those ones really haven't gone away because the market is still basically the same. However, we have around 10 million million job openings in the United States right now, and a lot of those jobs are not the highly skilled or highly educated positions. These are the jobs that keep your locations going, like your stockers, or your cooks, or your janitors. The essential positions that don't necessarily take a high amount of skill, but bring in a lot of value for the company, because without those positions, you can't exactly run a McDonald's location. If nobody's willing to cook at a McDonald's, well then how is the food going to get made for people to purchase? It can't. So that's a valuable position for these fast food companies, and there are a ton of other jobs like that right now, but the issue is those are the lowest paying jobs in our society, and they're not increasing their wages enough. And this used to be a big problem in the United States because millions of people couldn't just quit their jobs. In order to quit your job and continue your same standard of living, you had to have money. And the Federal Reserve and the United States government basically have given people thousands of free dollars over the last 2 years. A lot of people went out and spent this money, sure. A lot of people went out and invested this money, but a lot of people saved this money in an emergency fund in case they lost their job. And that's a big problem for businesses because now they don't have the power anymore. They know people can take a few extra months to search for the job that they actually want, which is essentially crushing our economy right now, and it's contributing to supply chain issues, which is contributing to inflation. Recently, the Consumer Price Expenditures Index went up at its fastest rate since 1983. So basically you have two big indexes in the United States that the Federal Reserve uses to measure what prices actually are and how high inflation is really getting. You have the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index essentially takes an average of all of the prices in the United States and shows how they're going up every single month. The PCE, or the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, shows how much people are actually paying for all of those goods and services. So one is just kind of an average and just throws all the prices in there, and the other actually shows what people are paying for goods and services. And that gauge actually went up by almost 5% in 2021. That means people are starting to pay a lot more for all of the same things. Literally, they're paying more. The CPE also showed that employment costs have went up at their fastest rate since 2002. And that has kind of been coupled by a slight boost in labor participation. People have been quitting their jobs at record rates, but that's starting to run out now. People are starting to run out of funds and they're having to go back to work. So that participation is going up because even though companies have had to pay workers more, they don't have a lot of workers right now. All of a sudden though, as we start getting more and more people employed in the United States, well, companies are gonna have to start paying even more because they're hiring more people. But if this happens at a slow rate, then companies will raise their wages at a much slower rate. You see, these big corporations don't raise, for the most part, individual wages. They'll raise an entire sector. That way it's fair for everyone. They won't say, George, you get a $3 pay raise while John does not get a pay raise at all. They'll raise everybody or they won't raise anyone. And that's kind of a good and a bad thing because as we start to see labor participation go back up, well, wages are going to go up too, and companies are going to raise their prices even more. This is one of the issues that the Federal Reserve is tackling right now. They want to reach a period called maximum employment in the United States, which is a little bit different than our unemployment rate. You see, the unemployment rate basically shows how many people have lost their jobs during a specific period of time. Labor participation and maximum employment is different because not everybody in the United States absolutely needs a job. And it's the Federal Reserve's job to make monetary policies that incentivize people to work even if they don't necessarily need to. Reaching maximum employment basically means that everyone in the United States that's able to work and can work is working right now. That's a benefit because that means everyone is getting a paycheck and everyone can buy things. And it kind of naturally means that wages are going to go up, but if everyone's working, they'll eventually go up to a certain point and then inflation will basically stop. Companies can then produce the maximum amount that will meet demand, and then that inflation caused by supply chain issues will stop too. So the Federal Reserve has to make monetary policies that kind of allow that to happen in the United States. But you also have to be reasonable here because that is just not going to happen. You're always going to have people that aren't going to work. for whatever reason. It's unreasonable to think that 100% of eligible workers in the United States are going to work. You're gonna get pretty close, as unemployment has reached a level below 4%, which is the lowest we've seen since the 1960s. And that's good, because we need a lot more supply right now, but if people don't start working, well, that's going to basically shift our economy forever, because you're going to see businesses and companies get rid of those low-tier jobs. So all of those jobs that do the day-to-day labor in individual locations are basically going to go away, and automation is going to take over. Companies are not going to try to continue to find people to do those jobs if people aren't willing to do those jobs anymore. I mean, that's basically how capitalism works. If someone is willing to do a job and get paid for it, then that creates a position. But if companies or a person are not willing to do a job for a specific amount of money, well, that job is not going to exist. And that is going to shift our economy. And at first, it's going to be a very bad thing, because we're going to have millions of jobs essentially disappear and a labor force that is not ready for the shift. However, over the long term, this could actually be a really good thing for our labor force, because now you have higher skilled and higher education positions open, and that's all that you have. So if people are able to get those skills and that higher education, then they're going to get those jobs. Now, it could also mean that the labor market becomes oversaturated for a lot of those positions, but that is the interesting thing about capitalism. It tries to make everything the most efficient way that it possibly can, so profits can be as high as they can. And that's where capitalism kind of meets our growing society in general, because we have a population that is growing, and we're going to need brand new jobs and brand new positions that haven't even been invented yet. I mean, as our society has progressed and more people are being born, there is a general need for technology and advancements throughout the entire world. You can see those advancements in real time with all of the brand new positions that have opened up over the last 20 years or so. I mean, this job working on YouTube wasn't even around 20 years ago, because YouTube wasn't even a thing yet. Now that is a genuine and legitimate career for thousands of creators on the internet. In 20 years, we're going to see an explosion similar to that in a lot of different fields. In addition, our workforce is becoming more educated because of free education like YouTube. Anybody can go online and learn anything they want to pretty much for free, which means our learning is more democratic than it ever has been in American history. You don't need to necessarily go to a specific institution to learn a specific thing. You can learn whatever you want whenever you want to, from basically whoever you want. So how is this inflation issue going to shape up in 2022? Well, wages are eventually going to need to rise for pretty much every company in the United States, which means prices are going to continue to go up. Now, the Federal Reserve has tried to get as aggressive as they can with inflation, but honestly, it's probably not aggressive enough. If prices continue to go up and wages continue to go up, well, that's a problem, because you basically just have this spiral then that is going to spiral out of control. If workers need to pay more for everyday goods and services, well, they're gonna need to make more at their jobs, because if they're not making enough money, then again, that job is not worth their time and they're going to quit. So if businesses pay them more, then now they have more money to buy more things. But as they buy more things, companies run out of supply, which means they have to produce more, which means the prices go back up. Now that the prices are back up, companies have to start paying more, and again, you see this spiral here. That can pretty much happen infinitely, and it's going to continue to happen as the Federal Reserve prints more money every single year. If we can kind of reach an equilibrium between the job market and money printing, then you'll kind of see inflation get back to a normal level, a level that shows we have a high demand for money, but not high enough to where everything is exploding in value. And it's important to mention that we've seen this high level of inflation before in the United States. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, inflation was around the 11 to 13% mark. That's nearly double what it is right now. And remember, it's elevated right now. So inflation goes back down, but it may also cause things like a recession or stagflation, because your economy is shrinking while inflation continues to go up. Booms and busts are always going to happen in an economy. And you kind of need things to explode every once in a while, because nothing can go up or down forever. And when things explode and crash like that, well, then they can start to heal and get back to a normal level again. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about Jamie Dimon basically calling other CEOs crybabies for complaining about raising their wages because of inflation? Do you think that wages going up because of inflation is a good thing, or do you think eventually this is going to tank our economy? As always, whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for me, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.